Commander 2020, a set where they put tokens in Jeskai and made Abzan the literal worst graveyard deck I have ever seen. At least we know Wizards always makes the right decision. Today, we will talk about the new cards that this set brings to us, and if they have what it takes to sneak their way into the Cube format. All that and more, you're listening to the CardMisers podcast.
Welcome back. Today we're boiled over to discuss some new cards joining the Cube format. There's no reason to hold back, so let's pop this bean.
So to begin, this is our evaluation of cards from the new Commander 2020 set.
Yep, these are our fresh takes. We're literally seeing these cards for the first time and haven't had an opportunity to playtest anything.
So if we get anything wrong or miss something, tell us in the comments. Don't come to our house and light our cubes on fire and sacrifice them to our Lord Cthulhu. Please. Take Jake's, not mine. Actually, we share cubes, so don't burn anybody's cubes. Guys, don't burn cubes.
Just don't come here. Next, we will not discuss Modern Cube because if you were to put any of these cards in your Modern Cube, it would instantly become a Legacy Cube because cards from Commander sets aren't legal in Modern.
That's right. If you happen to have been born yesterday and don't know, Commander cards printed in the Commander sets are not legal in any formats other than Commander, Legacy, Vintage, Pauper, etc. Not Modern or Standard. So forget about your dreams.
With no further ado, let's move on to these cards.
Right. So the first thing, we've decided that in this evaluation, we're going to do it a little bit different than last time. So last time, we put all the cards together, just talked about our general takes. Now we're sort of splitting it up into cards that we think are Vintage and Legacy playable first, and then get into the cards that are Commander playable, because obviously most of these cards, they're printed for the Commander format, so clearly many of them will be good for the Commander Cube format, which means that you don't really want to hear us just drone on and on about all the cards that are good in Commander Cube, because there are so many of them. We're going to get to the Vintage and Legacy playable ones first, which are obviously playable in Commander, but just a heads up on how we're structuring this.
All right, so that brings us to the first card that we have, which is Kalmax the Stormsire. And Kalmax the Stormsire is a 4-mana, 1 in Temur colors, so green, blue, and red, for a 4/4 legendary creature, Elemental Dinosaur. And it says, whenever you cast your first instant spell each turn, if Kalmax the Stormsire is tapped, copy that spell. You may choose new targets for the copy. And whenever you copy an instant spell, put a +1/+1 on Kalmax. First off, Travis, this card is great.
Absolutely. Straight up 4 mana for a 4/4 with great upside is already a playable card.
Right, and the fact that it can copy your instant spells each turn, this is a really powerful effect in Vintage and Legacy, where they have access to the most powerful and efficient instants of all time.
Yeah, we're talking, Gushes, Ancestral Recalls, Unsummons, Mana Leak, Factor Fictions, pretty much every blue card that is good, as well as all of the red burn spells. I wouldn't be surprised if this card literally spawns its own archetype in Vintage and Legacy cubes around copying those kinds of spells.
Oh, for sure. And personally, this card gets my goat juiced up and ready to draft some cube, man. I love playing at instant speed, and this Stegosaurus is exactly the creature I want in my spells-only decks. We haven't even mentioned how cool this card can be in Commander Cube, dude.
That's right, a format where huge instants are some of the best cards, and you have 3 other players' turns to trigger this effect with. He's like a big, chunky Animar that spits copies of Lightning Ball at your enemies and looks cool as heck doing it.
Yeah, I think that's all that needs to be said. This card will see play in any Cube format where it's legal.
And that brings us to our next card, which is Tayam Luminous Enigma. Tayam is a 4-mana, 1 in Abzan colors for a 3/3 legendary creature, Nightmare Beast. The text reads, each other creature you control enters the battlefield with an additional vigilance counter on it. And it has an activated ability for 3 mana, remove 3 counters from among creatures you control, put the top 3 cards of your library into your graveyard, and then return a permanent card with converted mana cost 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. So this card has a subpar rate for 4 mana as a 3/3 without any keyword abilities, which means that in the most competitive of cubes, you really want to give this card a critical eye. It might not fit in there.
However, Travis, the abilities on this card have some potential. First off, we have an effect that gives all your creatures vigilance when they ETB, and this vigilance won't disappear if Tayam is removed. So the second ability is where the card really shines, though. 3 mana to remove counters from creatures and return permanents with CMC 3 or less is a powerful ability. This card is a lot like Sun Titan with both upside and downside. It really depends on what kind of archetypes your cube is supporting to decide if this card should be included. We definitely see this card being played in Commander Cube and a counter strategy. Vintage and Legacy Cube really depends on the depth that Counters has as an archetype.
Right. And there absolutely have to be some infinite loops with this that we aren't thinking of, so keep that in mind if you can find those.
Next, we have Verge Rangers, which I'm really excited about. So, Verge Rangers is a 3 mana, 2 and a white, for a 3/3 creature, human scout. It has first strike, and it says, you may look at the top card of your library at any time. Also, as long as an opponent controls more lands than you, you may play lands from the top of your library. First things first, Corsair Crewfix in white. On a 3/3 first striking body for 3 mana. Bada boom! This card is great, dude.
Definitely playable in Vintage and Legacy. It is sometimes match dependent if your opponent has a strategy where they miss many land drops, but in a white aggro deck where wasting draws on lands is a death sentence, this card really shines.
Yeah, without that 3/3 first striking stat line, this card would be just pretty mediocre. But the fact that it's a fighter and a value creature makes it actually relevant in older cube formats.
And in Commander, this card helps white a ton. Notoriously the worst color for card draw and mana, white gets both in this card because, when you play a land off the top, you're technically drawing that card, and making land drops consistently is something that white literally never does.
Yeah, guys, so stop having boring draws, stop having boring life, and get this card.
Amen, brother. All right, that brings us to our next card. Has anyone ever pulled you aside and asked if you like free stuff?
Has anyone ever propositioned you with free stuff for simple favors?
Have you ever gotten anything for free that literally blew your freaking lid?
Well, guys, if you answered yes or no to any of those questions, it really doesn't matter. Then prepare your socks to be ejected with this card.
This card, Ethereal Forager, is a 6 mana, 4 and 2 blue for a 3/3 creature elemental whale. It has Delve. And if you don't know what Delve is, find out, because it's critical for you to understand how good this card is. It also has flying, and whenever Ethereal Forager attacks, you may return an instant or sorcery card with exiled with Ethereal Forager to its owner's hand. Okay, see? Everything is free.
Are you amazed? No? Well, you're stupid, because this card is great.
Did you know that Delve is a ridiculously broken mechanic that should never have been printed and has seen more bans than any other mechanic in the history of Magic? Oh, you didn't know that? That's so weird.
This card will undoubtedly see play in Vintage and Legacy cubes. A 2 mana, 3/3 flyer is a stupid rate for a card and basically makes it free. Just free. It actually isn't free technically, but it's free.
Each time it attacks, it can return a card from your exile to your hand if it was exiled with this card. That means when you delve 4, you have the potential to exile and subsequently return 4 instants and sorceries to your hand.
Even if you just get 1 or 2 instants or sorceries back with this card, you've hit a home run.
Absolutely. Do not sleep on this card. If your blue decks have instants and sorceries, which is what blue is about, pick this up. It's just really good value, okay? And will probably see bans. It will probably see bans, okay? It's just, Delve is that disgusting. All right, let's move on to the next card before I pop a lid. This card will bring everyone down a couple notches.
So, the name of this card is Xyrus, the Writhing Storm, and he costs 5 mana, 2 in Teamer colors, so a green, blue, and a red. He is a 3/5 legendary creature, Snake Leviathan. He has flying, and it says, whenever an opponent draws a card except for the first one they draw in each of their draw steps, create a 1/1 green snake creature token. Also, Xyrus the Writhing Storm deals combat damage to a player. You and that player each draw that many cards.
So let's cut to the chase here. This card is on this list for one reason and one reason only. 5 mana for a 3/5 rate is so bad, it literally caused the Great Depression.
Yeah, Travis, the only redeeming part of this card is that it wrecks out the wheel effects. Wheel of Fortune, Time Twister, Windfall, etc. Any of these cards will generate you snake at the Wa freaking zoo.
Consider this card for Vintage Legacy in Commander only if you have lots of wheel effects, like we mentioned, or if every deck is drawing just boatloads of cards. In Commander, this card is great with any each player draws effects, as each pass around the table will net you 3 Snake Boys.
Exactly. Remember that this card triggers for each card your opponents are drawing other than the first one they get each turn.
So, put this Slither.io in your cube if you want to wheel around the merry-go-round. If not, avoid it like the plague.
Amen.
All right, so that takes us to our next card, which is Curious Herd. Now, this card is a 4 mana, 3 and a green for an instant. and it says, choose target opponent. You create X 3/3 green beast creature tokens, where X is the number of artifacts that player controls.
This card is interesting because we are only recommending it for the Legacy and Vintage formats as a sideboard card. We aren't even recommending you pick this card for the main deck. That's how weird it is.
Basically, your cube may want this card as a hoser for artifact decks. Sometimes these decks can be in need of balancing to a small degree, and cards like this that give you a billion 3/3s for only 4 mana at instant speed are exactly the effect to do that.
Right, Travis. So, use this card only if you need a sideboard hoser for an artifact strategy. Otherwise, it's pretty bad. But we figured it deserved a mention.
Right, and that brings us to our next card,
which is Cryptic Trilobite. And this card costs XX. It is a 0/0 for a creature, Trilobite, and it says Cryptic Trilobite enters the battlefield with X +1/+1 counters on it. Also, remove a +1/+1 counter from Cryptic Trilobite, add colorless. Spend this mana only to activate abilities. Also, it says 1 generic mana and tap it, put a +1/+1 on Cryptic Trilobite.
So this card is a weird one, and it's kind of hard to judge. Based on what the card does, it looks like it could be good.
Yeah, essentially it stores your mana in a creature until you need it. But as a 0 converted mana cost artifact, there are always ways to abuse this. We can't think of them off the top of our heads, but mark my words, this card will see play in Vintage and Legacy cubes.
As for Commander cubes, meh. Maybe if you have a lot of counter synergies where you can buff him really big, then go off with colorless mana with those activated abilities, but other than that, he isn't very useful.
Yeah, dude, a strange one for sure. So, guys, let us know if you come up with anything good in Cube.
Absolutely. We're putting it in your hands. The Cryptic Trilobite is yours to deal with. All right, that brings us to our next card, and I like this one a lot. This card is Tidal Barracuda. It is a 4 mana, 3 and a blue for a 3/4 creature fish. And the text reads, any player may cast spells as though they had flash. Meh. Your opponents can't cast spells during your turn. Ooh, it has some cool flavor text. It lurks in the spaces between moments. Cute.
Damn, this card's a doozy in formats like Vintage and Legacy Cube.
Yeah, remember that this effect grants you a Vidalcan Ori on a body. And that is no small body either. I mean, I have seen smaller creatures than 3/4s win games of Magic. What do you think Snapcaster is good for?
Amen to that. I might also add, Travis, that the card strips the ability to play spells on your turns from your opponents. That kind of effect was last seen on Teferi Time Raveler, which was very abusive. This shuts down counter spells from your opponent in a major way, allowing you to play your threats whenever you want on your turn.
This card will certainly see play in places, so pick one up if you think you're going to use it. And I don't really recommend this card for Commander Cube, as giving Vidalcan Ori to the table is far more powerful for them than preventing them from playing on your turn is a downside, if that makes sense. It's better for them than it is for you.
Alright guys, next up we have a fun little 2-mana artifact called Fluctuator. And it says, cycling abilities you activate cost up to 2 less to activate.
So as you can tell by hearing what the card does, this one is quite narrow in its focus and utility.
That's right, Travis. It is only relevant to cards with the cycling mechanic and makes them cheaper to activate by 2 mana.
Yeah, we put this card on the list because there's definitely some serious combo potential in Vintage and Legacy with this card.
Yeah, dude. Lowering the cost of cycling by 2 makes many cards literally free to cycle. This paired with any effect that triggers off drawing or discarding cards can lead to a combo finish for many decks, man.
Yeah, I always advocate that people include cycling in their cubes as it makes games more fun and interesting when dead cards can be recycled for better ones, and this card can make a simple cycle theme into a deadly combo archetype real quick.
Yeah, I know I always like playing cycling cards, and think about playing this for Vintage or Legacy where the deck sizes are only 40 cards if you have a boatload of cycling cards in your cube.
Alright, and that brings us to our next card, which is Surly Badgersaur. This card is a 4 mana, 3 and a red for a 3/3 creature Badger Dinosaur. I've literally never seen that creature type before in my entire life. I don't think I've ever seen Badger before in my entire life. Okay, it reads, whenever you discard a creature card, put a +1/+1 counter on Surly Badgersaur. Whenever you discard a land card, create a treasure token. And finally, whenever you discard a non-creature, non-land card, Surly Badgersaur fights up to 1 target creature you don't control. Yeah, put him up.
Yeah, guys, if you have ever seen the community design card Waste Not, you'll understand where Wizards is going when they designed this.
Yeah, 4 mana for a 3/3 is kind of a bad rate for a creature, so as we said before, this card may not be for the most competitive of cubes, but the abilities do warrant a second glance.
That's right, dude. The 3 abilities trigger whenever you discard a card and can stack up to some crazy value.
The 2 most important parts of this card is the ability to grow bigger and fight opposing creatures. This card can clear a board by itself with enough discard.
You'll usually want to pair a card like this with a lot of wheel or rummaging effects. So Faithless Looting and Wheel of Fortune are where you're going with this card.
Yeah, definitely give this card a shot. It definitely has some potential.
For Commander, the ramp is possibly the best part of this card. Red has a lot of effects that let you discard lands to deal damage, and pairing this effect with that can lead to some games that red players have never seen before.
Alright, so that's the end of the list for those Vintage and Legacy playable cards. Now we're going to move on to purely Commander Cube cards. So the first thing we have to discuss here is a cycle of cards printed in this set that can be cast for free if you control your commander at the time.
So let's start off by listing the cycle of these cards.
So the first is Fierce Guardianship. It's a 3 mana, 2 and a blue for an instant, and it says if you control your commander, you may cast a spell without paying its mana cost, as the rest of these cards do, and it can counter target non-creature spell.
The next one is Deadly Rollick. It's a 4 mana, 3 and a black, instant, and it says, you guessed it, if you control your commander, you may cast the spell without paying its mana cost. Exile target creature.
The next card is Deflecting Swat, which is 2 and a red for an instant, and again it has that clause of having your commander and casting it for free, and it says you may choose new targets for target spell or ability.
Second to last, we have Flawless Maneuver. It's a 3 mana, 2 and a white, instant. If you control your commander, you may cast a spell without paying its mana cost, and it says creatures you control gain indestructible until end of turn.
Now the final one is Obscuring Haze, which is a 3 mana, 2 and a green for an instant. It has the clause, as we said, and it says prevent all damage that would be dealt this turn by creatures your opponents control.
So, as you guys can see, this cycle of cards can be extremely powerful only if played in a commander cube because they are free to cast if you control your commander.
Exactly. This can give your cube additional support and power through archetypes in your cube and help drive that point home while you're drafting and playing your commander cube.
Not to mention, dude, these are just good cards to play in your commander cube even if you can't cast them for free. But when you do get to cast them for free, which should be an option available to you with a lot of games in your cube, they provide insane value for free spells to cast.
Also, they can really throw off your opponents when you cast one of these for free with all your mana tapped. It's sort of a surprise, your opponents just got with this effect. So that's also really powerful.
Simply put, these are the most powerful commander conditional cards ever printed and will see play in every commander cube. They could potentially be too good, so look at them as a balancing issue if it comes to that, guys.
Exactly. These cards are insanely powerful, and sometimes you might find that they're just too powerful for the cube. Like Force of Will is a card that's extremely powerful. These don't have any downside to them, like at all. So, again, if there's a balancing issue there, don't feel bad about taking them out if it means that your cube is more balanced. These are probably the most powerful cards in the entire... They are the most powerful cards in the entire set.
But if your commander cube is leaning towards more of a competitive style, you'll definitely want to include these cards in your commander cube.
All right, so we're going to start by talking about the partner commanders for the set, which many of them are disappointing, but a few of them can be really cool for commander cube. So, starting, we've got Paco Arcane Retriever, which is a 5 mana, 3 and a red and a green for a 3/3 legendary creature, Elemental Hound, and it says partner with Haldan, Avid Arcanist, who we'll get to in a second, and has haste, and whenever Paco Arcane Retriever attacks, exile the top card of each player's library and put a fetch counter on each of them. Put a +1/+1 counter on Paco for each non-creature card exiled this way. His partner is Haldan, Avid Arcanist, which is a 3 mana, 2 and a blue for a 1/4 legendary creature, Human Wizard. It says partner with Paco Arcane Retriever, and you may play non-creature cards from exile with fetch counters on them if you exiled them, and you may spend mana as though it were mana of any color to cast those spells. So, Clifford the Big Red Dog and the Man with the Big Stick are not bad for teamer commanders.
Yeah, Paco/Clifford is the real heavyweight of this duo. He exiles cards from each player's deck and grows bigger for each non-creature. On the turn you cast him, he can be a 7/7 hasty attacker.
Although Clifford is the beef of this whole operation, do not forget Big Stick Dude, who can cast those non-creatures that Clifford, the big freaking dog, exiled.
Also, considering that these curve into each other pretty well, and that you have the opportunity to cast 4 cards a turn from you and your opponents, Clifford and the man with the yellow stick are a great commander pair for any commander cube.
You saying Clifford and the man with the big stick have made me want to play this duo. That's so iconic. It's literally Clifford the big red dog, but he's green.
Our next partner duo are personally my favorite from this set, which are Shabraz the Sky Shark and Brawlin Sky Shark Rider. So first up, Shabraz the Sky Shark is a 5 mana, 3, a white and a blue, for a 3/3 legendary creature, Sharkbird. And it says partner with Brawlin Sky Shark Rider. It has flying, and it says, whenever you draw a card, put a +1/+1 counter on Shabraz the Sky Shark, and you gain 1 life. It also has an activated ability, which costs a hybrid white or blue. Target human gains flying until end of the turn. His partner, Brawlin Sky Shark Rider, is a 4 mana, 3 and a red, for a 3/3 legendary creature, human shaman. It has partner with Shabraz the Sky Shark. Also, whenever you discard a card, put a +1/+1 counter on Brawlin Sky Shark Rider, and it deals 1 damage to each opponent. Also, it has an activated ability that costs 1 red that says, target shark gains trample until end of turn.
So, also known as Shark Boy and Lava Boy, this pair of partner commanders is without a doubt the most powerful from the entire set.
Oh, for sure. They facilitate the other strategy very effectively and contribute really powerful effects to each other.
We can see Lava Boy having some role to play in Vintage and Legacy cubes, abusing the wheel effects that they have and dealing tons of damage and getting really chonky.
Shark Boy, on the other hand, is a purely commander cube card. He's 5 mana for an underrate creature, which means that his abilities are really what you're going to be leaning on. He lets you gain life and put a counter on him whenever you draw a card. This can easily lead to him being the biggest Shark Boy ever to grace the little skies.
Not to mention that he works great with life gain strategies, triggering life gain at least once per turn.
So if you're using these cards in the cube format, really look to set them up with as many wheel effects as possible, because that is where the potential lies in these cards.
Our next pair are the Sultai partners. So we have Ukima Stalking Shadow, which is a 3 mana, 1 and a blue and a black for a 2/2 legendary creature, Whale Wolf, and it has partner with, honestly not sure how to say this one, Kazur? We're going to go with Kazur, like Kaiser but Kazur. Kazur, Ruthless Stalker, and it says Ukima Stalking Shadow can't be blocked. And when Ukima leaves the battlefield, it deals X damage to target player, and you gain X life where X is its power. Its partner, Kazur, Ruthless Stalker, is a 4 mana, 3 and a green for a 3/3 legendary creature, human warrior. It says partner with Ukima Stalking Shadow. And whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, put a +1/+1 counter on that creature. So the Not So Little Mermaid and Aquaman present an interesting strategy for Sultai.
Yeah, Sultai is usually more interested in the graveyard and getting value from there than the linear strategy proposed with this pair.
As with all these partners, this pair work really well with each other. The Aquaman of this duo really wants you to attack your opponents aggressively, something that can lead to getting many enemies in a game of Commander, so look out for that.
Yeah, but his partner can be a really potent threat that can really ruin an opponent when they want to remove it.
Yeah, overall, this pair is decent, and you should include it in Commander Cube if this is a strategy that you like.
As a pro tip, guys, threaten the player who tries to kill the Not So Little Mermaid with the death trigger. It will scare them away.
Exactly. That's some wise words right there. Some pro Commander gaming.
Next up, we have Species Specialist. It is a 4 mana, 2, black for a 2/3 human warrior, and it says, as Species Specialist enters the battlefield, choose a creature type. Also, whenever a creature of the chosen type dies, you may draw a card. So, on first glance, this card seems almost worse than many Midnight Reaper or Grim Harrowspect effects, but drawing a card when a creature of the chosen type dies can be even more narrow than these effects.
Which is why we have to read our cards, right, Jake?
Don't even give me that. But he's right, exactly. You see, this card triggers even when tokens die, which is huge. Most effects like this require non-tokens because otherwise they would just be too powerful.
Yet this Ninja Boy doesn't care if they're tokens or not. If your Commander Cube has a token strategy and or a heavy tribal strategy, definitely include this card.
Even dropping it to name goblins in a Corville deck to sacrifice 3 goblins and draw 3 cards is worth it.
Yeah, don't sleep on this guy, not just because he looks like he will kill you in your sleep, but he's a good card too.
That brings us to our next card.
Right, so the next card is Frontier Warmonger. It is a 4 mana, 3 in a red for a 4/4 creature human warrior. The text reads, whenever one or more creatures attack one of your opponents or a planeswalker they control, those creatures gain menace until end of turn. Oh, and the flavor text says, she cares little for leaders or loyalties so long as the battle rages on. That is one bloodthirsty babe.
So this card is a great card for Commander Cubes. Being able to incentivize your opponents to attack players other than you to eliminate your enemies is always awesome.
Let the war rage on. Dun, 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 dun. The blood never bothered me anyways. Yeah, Jake, like when you order your siblings to attack your enemies, easier to tell other people to do the work for you, which is what this card does.
You don't say so. Also, it's a 4/4 menace for 4 mana, which is not a bad rate.
And I don't want anyone thinking that Jake is some sort of war leader for his siblings. I just mean that he could probably order them to carry out a mob hit, and they would do it. He's got some loyal siblings. I digress. I think this card is a great addition for those red aggressive strategies in Commander Cube.
Yeah, dude, not to mention that aggro strategies can fall behind in Commander games due to the increased life of your opponents. Forcing them to attack one another can give you a really big damage advantage to leverage a dub.
Indeed. That's what games are about, is getting dubs. If we didn't want dubs, we wouldn't play games.
This card's a dub taker for me. That brings us to our next card, which is Sanctuary Blade. It is a 2 mana artifact equipment, and it says, as Sanctuary Blade becomes attached to a creature, choose a color. Equipped your creature gets +2/+0 and has protection from the last chosen color. And finally, it has an equip cost of 3.
What? An equipment card?
Hey. Calm down, guys. We know what you're thinking. If it ain't a sword, of blah blah, I don't like it. But we're here to tell you, it technically is a sword, even if it's not part of the cycle, so shut up and sit down so we can convince you.
Well, Jake, that was a little bit brutal to the audience, but yeah, this card gives you protection from one of the 5 colors of your choosing and allows you to change the color every time that you equip it. Not only can it protect your creatures, but it gives your creatures an extra +2 power, which can totally come in handy.
Oh yeah, this card will only see play in Commander Cubes because of the equip cost, but 2 mana for this equipment is not a bad rate, especially if your cube doesn't have that much removal in it, and even if it does, you might not be able to destroy that creature depending on the color of protection that it has.
Right, this card is definitely a good one. If you have equipment strategies, think about including it. It's hard to find really good budget equipment, and I think this one is one of them. All right, that brings us to our next card, which is Netherborn Altar. This card is a 2 mana, 1 and a black for an artifact, and the text reads simply, tap, put a soul counter on Netherborn Altar, put your commander into your hand from the command zone, then you lose 3 life for each soul counter on Netherborn Altar.
First off, Travis, this card is strictly for Commander Cube because of what it does, but it provides some insane value for your Commander Cube because of its ability.
Right, especially because no matter what your deck is, as long as you can support the color black, it will always be a relevant and strong ability.
Now, having to pay life for the ability can be a bit of a bummer, but the trade-off is profitable because the life that you pay is taking care of that commander tax, which can give you an insane advantage to always be able to play your commander for its regular cost.
Right, and paying the life for this card won't hurt that bad, because in the commander format, you start at 40 life, which makes this card even better.
Next up, we have Nesting Grounds. Nesting Grounds is a land, and it says, tap, add a colorless, but that's not all. It has an activated ability of 1 generic mana, and tap it, and it says, move a counter from target permanent you control onto another target permanent. Activate this ability only time you could cast a sorcery.
Hey, you got those lands with activated abilities? Huh? You got that good stuff? Those activated abilities, yeah? Yeah, you got my attention already.
Yeah, Travis, this card could be a nesting ground. Yeah, you heard that right, for those counter strategies. Its ability to move counters from permanents you control and put them on any permanent is pretty powerful. The downside to this card, like many other lands with activated abilities, is that you can only do this at sorcery speed and once per turn.
Right, but moving any kind of counter to any permanent of your choice sounds pretty dandy to me, not to mention that this land can still tap for colorless mana if you aren't going to use the ability right away.
Right. A lot of the times, your Commander Cube will already support counters due to some of the cards you'll have in there. I know that we have a +1/+1 counters theme in our Commander Cube, Travis.
Yeah, so guys, double check your Commander Cube and check to see if the counters is an archetype in there. And even if you know off the top of your head, because let's say that you actually like design your cube and just put in random cards and had to guess, and you know that you have a counters theme, which is probably the way I would suggest going about this, definitely put it in there.
Just think of this with Atraxa, that's gross.
Oh my gosh, don't bring up Atraxa, bro. 4 mana for a 4/4, flying, death touch, lifelink, vigilance, proliferate, then proliferate again.
We'll get to that card in another episode.
It's killing me. All right. Our final card of the day is Cartographer's Hawk. Now, this card is a big boy. No, it's actually a small boy.
It's a bird boy.
This card is a 2 mana, 1 and a white, for a 2/1 creature bird. It has flying, because it's a bird, and it's got wings. And whenever Cartographer's Hawk deals combat damage to a player who controls more lands than you do, return it to its owner's hand. If you do, you may search your library for a plains card, put it onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle your library.
First off, bruv, this bird boy has a pretty good rate for 2 mana, giving you a 2/1 flyer. And it's even evasive.
Yeah, and being able to search your library for lands in white helps out quite a bit in any format that you play white in. Not to mention, it searches up a plains card, which means that any dual land that is also a plains can be fetched as well. It doesn't have to be a basic.
Yeah, this card can be compared to Knight of the White Orchid, because it gives you lands, the downside being that you have to deal combat damage to an opponent, as well as returning this little birdie to your hand.
On the other hand, white ramp is extremely rare to come across, and we think that the trade-off for this card is fine because of it being, in the color white, where ramp is very, very few and far between.
Right, and Knight of the White Orchid already sees play in Commander Cubes, so make sure you include this one in your cube to get that white ramp, my friends.
Indeed. Stop having a boring white. Stop having a boring life. All right. I think that sums it up for all of the cards. If this was a shorter episode than usual, we apologize as there are fewer cards and a lot of them are absolute white trash. Thank you, Wizards. But let's move on to the end step. So now that all that's on the stack, if you have any responses, feel free to leave them in the comment section. If you thought of something that we didn't, please let us know. And with that, we'll move on to the resolution and deliver our Wayne quote of the week. Hit it.
Your Wayne quote of the week is brought to you by Young Money Entertainment, and is, quote, "If it costs to be the boss, oh well, I guess I gotta pay," end quote.
Pay that commander tax. All right, that's the end of the podcast. We're out.
Until next time, Miser Gang.
Peace.